Welcome to Spitfire Mods. This video is going to cover racking a board, racking a fresh board, fluxing the board, and applying the thermocouples to the proper locations for reflow. This is an Xbox board with a 3-ring. It's going to be reflowed. So we're going to use a single rail for an inner support, and we're going to be looking to hit that front hole right next to the GPU. So what we're going to do is try and get us positioned so that we actually can still center our chip, and that should actually be center. So right there is the position we're going for. So we position that hole first, and then we basically adjust our rails to accompany that. So we got our front board support, our rear board support, and our middle clamp. And then we're going to lug down our side arm. I'm going to bring in our right hand side. We got our front. Alright, so we got all our rails on. Now we're going to look underneath. And what I noticed is our rear bolts are actually touching the board. So that's not going to work out. So what we're going to need to do is lift our board back off. And we want to eliminate these rear studs that are in the way. One way to do it is to just bring them inside and to run them down so that they're below our board's plane. And we're going to want to get them nice far down so that they actually aren't able to touch any components on the bottom of the board. Okay, once they're down out of the way, go back on with the board. Now, one thing I noticed, now those standoffs have a ring, metal around the pins, which should actually fit in the holes, so you want to make sure those are adjusted properly. Alright, so everything's good except that as you can see, our lower board temperature probe is not lined up properly, so we're going to readjust that. It's at the right height, but it's at the wrong position. So we're going to move that over and then go back on. So as you can see, that lower probe now is making contact with the board, and if you look underneath, you can see it's touching the board perfect. Now we need to flux it and probe it before we go further. So I'm going to turn on our light. Okay, so what we want to do is adjust our upper assembly. Now we want to set our height. So we bring our height down. And then we're also going to need to set our front to back. So your front should actually be, on a 50mm nozzle, your front should be all the way forward. This is where you want to square off your nozzle. Alright, so you want to be able to bring your nozzle down without touching the board. Alright, so that's lined up well, but our chip is actually a little bit front. So what we're going to want to do is shift everything back a little bit. So you loosen your set screws on your board, and then you just slide your board back a little bit. Now you're going to have to make sure that this pin moves back with the board. Alright, so we're going to slide it back just a little bit and then retighten our arms. And then recheck it. Alright, so now our chip's sitting centered in our nozzles. Alright, that's how we want it. Check our bottom. Okay, our bottom probes are both in line. Make sure there's no rock on the top. Now we're going to want to flux the board and then do our upper probe. So take your bottle of flux. We're going to basically put a drop under each gap on the heat epoxy. There's epoxy holding the chip in place. We're going to tap the excess flux out the side. Then we're going to basically blot dry our excess flux so it's not floating around on the board. Now, chip is fluxed. We're going to go ahead and place it back on the board. We're going to lock in our side supports, which are going to help with flexing. Now, what we want to do next is probe our chip and clip down our corners. So using the clips that were provided, you want to put your clips on each stud. These clips basically slide down the stud and hold the board flat so that you don't have a corner rise up while you're working. As you can see, this side is actually already risen up a little bit, and that's because the board is not perfectly flat. A lot of times you'll get boards that have already been warped from some customer using a heat gun. So you're gonna want to clip the board, especially on an Xbox. Now we want to probe our GPU. That's our primary thermocouple, which is in position 1. So we're going to want to get some Kapton tape. Taking about a 2-inch piece of Kapton tape. Alright, we're going to want to take our probe, loop it around like we had talked about before. Now you want to straighten your tip. You want to take that wire, it's all rippled, you want to straighten that out as much as possible. It's going to get a little beat up over time, but you just want to try and keep it as straight as possible. Now on the very tip, there's a very tiny point on the tip of that wire. What we want to do is, I usually go alongside one of the beads of high temperature epoxy, and then using a piece of Kapton tape, go right between the chips. Now our tip is actually just under the edge of the chip, and as you can see, it's right in next to the epoxy piece, fine wire tip. Our lower board support is making contact with the board. Our stainless steel is lined up. Now we're going to line up our lower heater. So you want to bring your bottom plate up till it makes contact with the board, and then back it down so that you have probably about 3 or 4 millimeters of gap between the corners of the nozzle, the lower nozzle. It's important not to have your lower nozzle within 4 millimeters because you're going to have a couple millimeters of flex. Even though everything's clamped and supported, you're going to have a very small amount of flex. Alright, so now we're going to bring our nozzle down, which should be properly set height-wise. As you can see, the nozzle is slightly cocked and elevated on the left. So we're going to adjust that, make some small push adjustments, bring that down tight, and then we're ready to run our profile. So that's placing your board on the Scotle unit. All your probes are in place, and your board's ready for a good reflow.